Your test tomorrow is on sections 3.4, 3.5, and 3.6. We went over some problems yesterday. If you remember, we did some finding all the roots problems, right? When we had to use P over Q. That's where we list out all the factors of the last term. Now, tomorrow on your test, every version, I've worked them all out already, every version factors nice and pretty. But you may have to do P over Q more than one time. You may find one of the zeros, find a root, and then whatever's left over doesn't factor. So you have to do P over Q again. Okay? That could possibly happen. So just make sure that you don't get frustrated and you're aware of that. You'll also have another question that gives you a bunch of roots. And you have to do what? Go backwards. You have to write the polynomial that would provide you with those roots. What is unbelievably important to have in your answer? G of x, f of x. It has to be equal to function notation. Something of x. If you don't have it, I'm going to do what? I'm going to take points off. And then we're going to focus on all of this stuff from 3.6. Okay, your cheat sheet. You guys cannot use your cheat sheet. You have to know when the question says, how do I find x and y-intercepts, what to do. You have to know that you have to write your x and y-intercepts as ordered pairs. We need to be on top of how to find vertical asymptotes versus horizontal asymptotes versus how to write the domain, all that good stuff, okay? So we're going to go through each of these questions together. We're going to talk through everything. I'll bring up some other things that might be helpful information, but you guys need to make sure that you are following along and paying attention. So pull it up and let's go. The first question, we talk about X-intercepts, guys. Try to do this without looking at your cheat sheet. How do you find X-intercepts? Set the numerator equal to 0. So I'm going to say 5x squared plus 5x equals 0. Any kind of factoring that you guys have seen before is fair game tomorrow. GCF, difference of perfect squares, factoring where A is not 1, grouping, all of those things are fair game. Well, you guys have seen that since the beginning of the year. So just make sure that you understand that. Yes, sir?
Do you know if any of the questions we have to use a quadratic?
I don't believe so, but if it comes up, then just go ahead and do it. Okay, so the first thing I look for here is a GCF. What can I take out of 5x squared and 5x? 5x, good. So if I take out that 5x, I'm left with what? X plus 1. Now that that is fully factored, what do I do with each piece? Set it equal to 0. Great. So I have an x-intercept at 0, and I have an x-intercept at -1. Make sure you guys are showing me your work. If you leave your answer like that, are you getting full credit? No. Your x-intercepts need to be written as ordered pairs. Your y-intercepts need to be written as ordered pairs. Make sure you do so. For the y-intercept, how do you find, for our y-intercept, how do you find the y-intercepts? Plug in 0. Look how easily you can show your work here. If I plug in 0 in the numerator, it's 0 plus 0, right? Over 0 plus 0 plus 5. Is that what happens when I plug in my zeros in my numerator and my denominator? Good. So I'm left with 0 over 5. What is 0 divided by 5? 0. So my y-intercept happens to be 0, 0. Everybody with me? We have our x-intercept up here in blue, our y-intercept in green. Now our vertical asymptote. Guys, when you find the vertical asymptote, you're also finding the domain, right? So let's talk about that. Look at your little cheat sheet if you need to, but try and think from the top of your head, how do you find the vertical asymptote? Denominator equal to 0. So we're going to find vertical asymptote and domain right here. I'm going to say x squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 0. Can I factor that?
Yes.
Are there factors of positive 5 that multiply to give me 5 but add to give me 6?
Plus 1 plus 5.
Yep. X plus 1 and x plus 5. So I end up having asymptotes at x equals -1 and x equals -5, right? My vertical asymptotes. Well, those are those invisible boundary lines that are vertical. They go through the x-axis that your graph gets really close to but doesn't touch. So what is our domain? Based upon our vertical asymptotes, what is our domain? Written interval notation. Negative infinity to -5. Agreed. Union. Perfect. Good job. Very good job, guys. Your vertical asymptote and your domain go hand in hand. Now, in order to find a horizontal asymptote, guys, how do you find horizontal asymptote? You compare the numerator degree to the denominator degree. Aha! I know it's always going to be y equals. So I compare the numerator degree, which is 2, to the denominator degree, which is 2. Degree just means highest exponent. They're both the same. So what do I do? If the degrees are the same, how do I find the horizontal asymptote?
The leading coefficient.
It's the leading coefficient of the numerator, which is 5, over the leading coefficient of the denominator, which is 1. So you have a horizontal asymptote at y equals 5. I cannot impress upon you enough. Vertical asymptote, x equals. Horizontal asymptote, y equals. X-intercept, number, comma, 0. Y-intercept, 0, comma, number, right? This question does not ask for holes, but how would you guys find the holes? Factor, numerator, denominator. We already did that. If I factor the numerator, it was 5x times what? X plus 1? Over, when I factored the denominator, it was x plus 1 and x plus 5. Are there holes? Yeah, there's a hole. Where? So I cross that out, I set it equal to 0, and I have a hole at x equals -1. If they told me in the directions to write it as an ordered pair, how would I write that? -1, comma, 0. This is how I expect to see work shown tomorrow. There is some stuff that involves very minimal work, like your horizontal asymptote, something like that. But I expect to see what your brain is thinking, and this is exactly how you would do that. So don't tell me tomorrow, I just did it in my head. No, I need to see what's going on in your head. Yes, sir.
For those types of problems, could there be like a possibility that I have to use P over Q?
No.
No.
Good question, but no. What happens if you factor the top and the bottom and nothing cancels out? No holes. That's okay. Your answer would be none. Don't leave it blank and don't put a 0, because 0 in this case is not the same as none. If nothing crosses out, there would be no holes.
If a fraction has a 0 on the denominator, it's a 9.
It's correct. If you have a 0 in the denominator, you have -4 over 0. You cannot have that. That would be undefined. So if that was the answer for the intercept, like for the Y-intercept, you got something over 0, you could say undefined or you could say none. Sarah?
Do you have to write it as an ordered pair? Do you just do it full at?
Just depends upon, that's a good question, depends upon what the directions say.
Okay.
If it just says state the holes, you can say hole at x equals -1. If it says write it as an ordered pair, then follow the directions. All right, let's look at the next one. Very similar, right? Same setup. We're going through the same motions. Just make sure. So let's do our X-intercepts. Okay, so how do I find the X-intercept? Remind me again. Numerator equal to 0. The numerator is the one on top. So x squared plus 4x minus 5 equals 0, correct? Okay, what are the factors of -5? They're going to multiply to give me -5, but add to give me a 4. Plus 5 minus 1. Remember, any factoring tomorrow is fair game. GCF, difference of perfect squares, factoring where a is not 1, all that good stuff. So when I solve this, I get x equals -5 and x equals +1. How do I write that as an ordered pair? -5, 0, and 1, 0. Good. Now our Y-intercept. Annabelle just asked me, can I just put zeros? If this is how you want to show your work tomorrow for your Y-intercept, you just want to go 0, 0, 0, 0. That's totally fine with me. Because you're showing me that you understand how to find it. You're plugging in 0 for x. So I end up with -5 over negative 2. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. So my y-intercept is at, when I plug in 0, I get out positive 5 over 2. Good. All right, so as we go through here, we found the x and the y. How do you find the vertical asymptote again? Remind me. Denominator equal to?
0.
And vertical asymptote and domain go hand in hand. So when I find my vertical asymptote, I'm also finding my domain. So my vertical asymptote and domain, I'm going to say x squared plus x minus 2 equals 0. Again, very basic factoring here. The one in the test might be a little more difficult, like some other ones that we've had over the last few days, or the last few quizzes and tests and stuff like that, but all factoring you guys can do. What are the factors of -2? That'll multiply to give me a -2, but add to give me a +1. X plus 2 and x minus 1. Okay, so we factored x plus 2, x minus 1. So I come out with x equals -2 and x equals +1, right? Those are my vertical asymptotes. Those are those vertical lines that your graph gets real close to but doesn't touch. So then once I have my vertical asymptotes, I can now state what my domain is. What is your domain? I can use any number in the entire world except for -2 and 1. So how do I say that? -infinity to? Perfect. Perfect. Yes, ma'am. Fantastic. Good job. Good job. Sure. Then how do I find horizontal asymptotes? Okay, we're going to find our It's a y equals always. I'm going to compare the numerator degree to the denominator degree. Well, in this case, what's the numerator and denominator degree? It's equal. It's 2 over 2. What happens when it's equal? Leading coefficient of numerator, leading coefficient denominator. In this case, it's 1 over 1. So my horizontal asymptote is that y equals 1. And then if I have holes, how do I find holes? You factor. Anything that's the same on top and bottom, you cross out. Good job. All right, same kind of question, guys. X-intercepts. Remind me again, X-intercepts. We're going to go through this one quickly. X-intercept. X-intercept. Numerator equal to 0. X squared minus 7x minus 8 equals 0. So what are the factors? Good. X minus 8. Very good. X plus 1. So I have x equals +8, x equals -1, correct? Am I getting full credit for writing that as my x-intercepts? Got to be an ordered pair. Good. So it's 8, 0, -1, 0. Good job. Yes.
Can you put median or no?
You can. You don't have to. You can put and, whatever. That's fine. Now, as far as our y-intercept goes, remember, all we're doing is just plugging in 0. 0 here, 0 here, 0 here. What do I have? -8 over 1. So I have -8 over 1. So my y-intercept is at, when I plug in 0, I get out -8. Good job. Vertical asymptote. When I find vertical asymptote, I also find the domain. Very good. So my vertical asymptote and domain, what do? Denominator equal to 0. X plus 1 equals 0. Is that a hard problem to solve? No. The thing about this question that is hard is when you look at it and you go, oh, wait, am I supposed to do the numerator or the denominator? That's what's the hard part about this. The algebra behind this, you guys can all do. Even if it's hard factoring, you guys can do it. It's a matter of knowing where to look when. So once you have your vertical asymptote, our vertical line that your graph gets really, really close to but doesn't touch, how do you find the domain? -infinity to -1. Yep. Perfect. Good job. And then our horizontal asymptote?
The degrees.
Compare the degree. I know it's going to be y equals, so the numerator to denominator.
2 to 1.
Ooh, 2 to 1. This one's a little different. 2 is what then 1?
Greater.
What happens when the numerator degree is greater?
Y equals 0.
Nope.
Is it none?
It's none. Correct. Is there a slant asymptote here? Yes. Okay. How do we know? Okay, good. We're going to go over some in a second. First of all, you do long division. But you can always tell two ways. First of all, when you look and you say, okay, is the numerator degree bigger than the denominator degree? Yes, then there is one. Because think about it. X into x squared. Can that happen? X amount of times? Yes. But I told you guys yesterday, if your horizontal asymptote is none, you will have a slant asymptote. If you don't have a slant asymptote, then you will have a horizontal one. But again, that's not something you need to memorize. It's just like a realization we kind of see and come to. Yes, sir. If you have like just a constant in the numerator, say you had 6 over x plus 3, you do have an x in the numerator. It's just x to the 0 power. So your degree for the numerator would be 0, and your degree for the denominator would be 1. So in this case, Riley, look, it's less than, right? So then this would be y equals 0. It's when it's greater than, it's none. All right. Do I have any holes here?
Yes.
Let's just check and see. Holes. How do we find holes? Factor the numerator, x minus 8 and x plus 1. Factor the denominator, x plus 1. Anything exactly the same?
Yes.
Yeah. X plus 1 equals 0. So you have a hole at x equals negative 1. If you had to write that as an intercept, it would be? Negative 1, 0. Yeah. All right, this one looks a little different. This is why I put it on here. It's not any harder. We do the exact same thing. If we're going to find the X-Intercepts, y'all, where do we look? Numerator equal to?
0.
So x cubed, we're finding the X-Intercepts. X cubed minus 3x squared, correct? Minus 4x equals 0. Guys, when we factor, what is the first thing you look for?
GCF.
The GCF. Is there a GCF here?
Yes.
It is what?
X.
Okay, and I'm left with x squared minus 3x minus 4, correct? Can I factor that?
Yes.
X minus 4, x plus 1, right? X minus 4, x plus, yeah, okay. And then, so I have, how many intercepts do I have here? 3. X equals 0, x equals 4, and x equals negative 1. If I just took a number out, and you set that equal to 0, like 3 equals 0, it doesn't count. But if you actually take out a letter with it, you will have an extra answer. So my first intercept is at 0, 0. My second one is at 4, 0. And my third one is at negative 1, 0. Totally fine. Now to find the Y-intercept, we're going to plug in a whole bunch of zeros, right? So watch what happens here. This becomes 0, 0, 0, 0. Uh-oh. I have all zeros on top over negative 4. When 0 is in the numerator, what's my answer? 0. So my Y-intercept is 0, 0. If the 0 was in the denominator, what would my intercept have been?
Undefined.
Undefined or none. Good. Good, good, good. All right, vertical asymptote goes hand in hand with domain. Oh, she's so annoying. She keeps saying the same thing, right? Good. I hope you guys hear this in your sleep tonight. So I say vertical asymptote and domain. I set the denominator equal to 0, so x minus 4 equals 0. X equals 4. So my vertical asymptote is at x equals 4. So my domain is what? Negative infinity to 4. Union 4 to infinity. That was an easy one. I want to talk about something in 1 second. If I were asked to ask you for a whole, what do I do again? Numerator and the denominator. Good, 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 good. All right, guys. Horizontal asymptote. We check the numerator and the denominator degree, right? My horizontal asymptote is going to be at y equals. My numerator degree is 3. My denominator degree is 1. When the numerator degree is greater than the denominator degree, what is my horizontal asymptote? There is none, so you just tell me none. Good. Now, guys, this is not the case. I'm just asking you a side question. Let's say right here in the blue, these three answers, these were our vertical asymptotes. Just pretend, okay? This is not the case for this problem. But let's just pretend, like a side note, that these were vertical asymptotes. How would you write the domain for that? Negative infinity to -1, okay. Union.
Negative 1 to 0.
-1 to 0, okay.
0 to 4.
Okay.
Union.
4 to,
Infinity.
perfect. That's a long one. That's a long. What if I had 10 vertical asymptotes? Then you would just have 10 little things to go from left to right. Don't freak out if you have to write. It's okay. Just go from one number to the next. Then union, one number to the next. Yes, sir. All right. Good job. Good job. Let's go along. Okay, here we go. We're getting to our asymptote. How do you find slant asymptote, guys?
Division.
Long division. Your answer for slant asymptote has to be written in y equals mx plus b. You should have a number with an x, then plus or minus a number. If it doesn't work out that way, then there's not a slant. Look at this. You can tell me right now if there's a slant asymptote or not. Yes or no?
No. Well, yes.
Yes. Because the numerator degree is bigger. Let's do our long division. X minus 8 goes on the outside. And inside here I have x squared. Do I have anything behind the x squared?
No.
No. But can I just put zeros to hold their places? Yeah. You can do that. So we're just going to do our long division. First term into first term. X times what gives me x squared?
X.
Perfect. Put it up here on top. Get your subtraction ready. Before you multiply, get that subtraction ready. So x times x is x squared. X times -8 is minus 8x, right? Before I subtract, what do I have to do? Distribute, distribute, distribute. So 0 plus 8 is 8x. And then I have nothing to bring down, but I'm just going to hold the place so I can finish my problem. And we do it again. First term into first term. X times what gives me 8x? Plus 8. If you need to change the sign, you multiply by a negative, or vice versa. So get your subtraction set up. You just have to make sure that first term cancels out. So 8 times x is 8x. 8 times -8 is negative 64. Just say I wasn't paying attention and I wrote -54. Would that bother my problem?
No.
No, because the remainder
Does not go with
doesn't count. Try not to do something like that, but just, it's okay. Now I'm going to distribute, 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 and my x's cancel out. We're good to go. So how do I write my answer for slant asymptote?
Y equals X plus 8.
Y equals x plus 8. Perfect. If you do not write y equals, guys, I'm marking points off. Yes, ma'am.
So,
Okay, so let's look for vertical asymptote. Remember, how do you find the vertical asymptote again?
so the
Denominator equal to
0.
0. X minus 8 equals 0. Where's your vertical asymptote? X equals 8. I'm going to write x equals 8. The question here does not ask me for the domain, but just for some extra practice, I'm going to remind myself, what's the domain if my vertical asymptote is 8? Negative infinity to 8, union 8 to infinity. Good. Very good. All right, I'm going to try and find the slant and vertical asymptote. For this one, I know right away I don't have a slant asymptote because the numerator degree is not bigger than the denominator. If I asked you right here what the horizontal asymptote is, what would you guys tell me?
No. Well,
Horizontal. How do you find horizontal again? Horizontal.
denominator to 0.
Horizontal.
oh,
Compare what?
the degrees.
Numerator degree to the denominator degree. What's the numerator degree?
2.
2. What's the denominator degree?
2.
So you'd have a horizontal asymptote at y equals 1/4. All right, they don't ask you for that. I was just asking. So if I'm going to try and see if there is a Slant asymptote. Some of you guys are like, how do you tell? I can't tell. Don't worry about it. Just set up your long division. 4x squared minus 9 goes on the outside. X squared plus 6x goes on the inside. You can if you want. Now, my equation for my slant asymptote has to be y equals mx plus b. I have to have a letter and an x with it. So when I say first term into first term, 4x squared times what gives me x squared? Am I going to multiply 4x squared by a number and a letter to get x squared?
It's not gonna work.
It's not going to work. You'd have to multiply by 1/4. But that even if you recognized, oh, I can multiply by 1/4, is there an x with it? No. X squared times 1 gives you x squared. So there's no x here. This is none. No slant asymptote. Because they're the same. Yep.
Just put D and E.
Uh-huh. Does not exist, sure. Now for vertical asymptote, what do I do for vertical?
Set the denominator.
Denominator equal to 0. My vertical asymptote is 4x squared minus 9 equals 0. Yes, you can move 9 over, divide by 4, take the square root. I personally like to factor. This is the difference of perfect squares. What times what gives me 4x squared? 2x and? Good. What times what gives me 9? Negative 9.
Minus 3 plus 3.
Minus 3 plus 3. So when I solve this, 2x minus 3 equals 0. 2x plus 3 equals 0, right? We're going to move 3 over. I get 2x equals 3 divided by 2. I have a vertical asymptote at x equals 3 over 2. Here, I'm going to move 3 over. It becomes 2x equals negative 3 divided by 2, and I get x equals negative 3 over 2, right? So I have 2 vertical asymptotes. Now, doesn't ask you this, but what is the domain based upon those 2 vertical asymptotes? Negative infinity to negative 3 over 2. Great. Union. Negative 3 over 2 to 3 over 2. Good. Union. 2 infinity. Perfect. Now, earlier, Joseph asked a question, and he said, what if you get imaginary numbers? All right, if you get imaginary numbers, guys, we're talking about graphing on a real coordinate plane, meaning real numbers. So in a case like this, just say you had a problem like this, and it said, what are the X-Intercepts? Okay, this question does not ask you for that, but I'm just going through it. If I'm going to find the X-Intercepts, how do you find X-Intercepts again?
Equals 0.
What equal to 0?
The numerator.
The numerator. So x squared, let's just say this says x squared plus 6, not 6x. All right, let's just say this was the problem. What would I do with that positive 6?
Move it to the other side.
I move it to the other side. So I get x squared equals negative 6. Then I would do what? Take the square root. So x equals plus or minus. Guys, what do you notice right here? It's an I. There's an I. It's negative. So I'd have an imaginary solution. So your answer for x-intercepts here would be none. There are no x-intercepts. If you got an imaginary in the denominator, that just means there's no vertical asymptotes.
Is that the same thing for y?
You won't have an imaginary for y because you're going to plug in 0. So it'll be either 0 or none because the denominator becomes 0.
So for x-intercept, you might have one.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, how would you find the x-intercept for them?
For this one,
Yeah.
you would just say, okay, x squared plus 6x equals 0. So factor out an x. You get x plus 6.
Oh.
So then you'd have x equals 0 and x equals negative 6. Good question, good question.
Can you scroll down?
Sure. Slant asymptote. How do you find the slant asymptote?
Long division.
Long division, okay? The numerator goes inside, the denominator goes outside. So I have x minus 5 on the outside and x squared plus 6x plus 5. The remainder does not count. First term into first term. X times what gives me x squared?
X.
X. Get your subtraction set up before you multiply. What is x times x?
X squared.
X squared. What is x times negative 5?
Minus 5X.
Minus 5x. Before you subtract, what do you have to do?
Distribute.
Distribute. Do you guys see? If you forgot to distribute, you would have said 6 minus 5 is what? 1. So you would have told me your slant asymptote was that y equals x minus 1. Is that the case? No. What is 6 plus 5? 11x. Bring down that 5. And now I say, all right, well, first term into first term, x times what gives me 11x?
11.
Positive 11. Get your subtraction set up just to make sure. So when you multiply 11 times x is 11x. 11 times negative 5 is negative 55. And then before you subtract, you have to distribute. Negative and a positive 11x cancels. Then you know we're good to go. Does that plus 60 mean anything? No. Your answer here is y equals x plus 11. How do you find vertical? Denominator equal to?
0.
So x minus 5 equals 0. So I have a vertical asymptote at x equals 5. What is my domain based upon that little vertical asymptote? Negative infinity to?
5.
Perfect. Union. 5 to infinity. Good. All right, guys, don't get fooled by this kind of a question. All right, I'm going to just say, okay, I'm going to find the slant asymptote. So I do long division, right? So x squared minus 9 goes on the outside. X squared minus 9. And on the inside goes 4x plus 4x squared, right?
No.
It's not gonna work.
Well, that's what's on top.
Don't you have to switch the 4x squared the order?
Yes, ma'am. We need to switch the order for a couple reasons. First of all, you can't divide like that because it's not in standard form. Let me show you another reason why it's really important to make sure you're in standard form before you do anything. When I go here, guys, first term into first term, remember, my slant asymptote has to be y equals mx plus b. So x squared times what gives me 4x squared? 4. Is that in y equals mx plus b form? It actually is, because you'll have y equals 4. Right? You have y equals 4, correct? But your slant asymptote has to have an x in it. So your answer here is none. If I asked you what the horizontal asymptote is, horizontal is going to be at y equals, right? A lot of you would tell me that the numerator degree was 1 and the denominator degree was 2. Is that the case?
No.
No.
It's not the same.
What is the highest degree in the numerator? 2. It's just not in standard form. But you notice once you put it in standard form, 2 equals 2. So your horizontal asymptote is the leading coefficient of the numerator over the leading coefficient of the denominator. What is the leading coefficient of the numerator? 4. Over the denominator is 1. Isn't that what you got right here? That's why if there's no slant asymptote, you will have a horizontal asymptote, and vice versa. If you have... Yes, sir.
What happens if you just leave it as y equals 4? Would you get points off?
Yes, because that's not a slant asymptote is a slanted line. Y equals 4 is a horizontal line. It's not slanted. Your slant asymptote has to have an x in it, and that doesn't, so that's why there's none. Now, vertical asymptote, guys, how would you find the vertical? The denominator set equal to 0, so x squared minus 9 equals 0. Some of you just want to move 9 over. I like to factor, so x minus 3x plus 3. I get x equals 3, x equals negative 3. I have two asymptotes. One at x equals negative 3 and one at x equals positive 3. It doesn't matter where you write it, whether the negative or positives first. But based upon those asymptotes, y'all, what's my domain? Negative infinity to? Perfect. Yep.
And then 3 and
Perfect. Good job. Very good job. So let's go over this one more time before I bid you farewell. How do you find, I'm not going in order, so just think before you just blurt out. How do you find slant asymptote?
A long division.
Long division. What has to be in your answer for a slant asymptote?
Y equals mx plus b.
Y equals mx plus b. What about if I have a remainder? Doesn't matter. Good. How do you find y-intercept?
You put all zeros.
0 in for x. Good. How do you find domain? Okay, vertical asymptote. And then how do you find those? Denominator equal to 0. How do you find the x-intercept? Numerator equal to 0. Awesome. How do you find out if there's any holes?
If they have the same factor.
Factor top and bottom. See what crosses out. All right, good job, guys. Very good job. I think you're going to be okay.